Welcome to our live webcast, Your Future Practice, Practice and Contract Considerations, and Having a Successful Practice. Thank you for joining us for our first hot topic webcast after the Azra Fall pain meeting. My name is Rene Piscora. I'm practicing at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and I'll be serving as the moderator for this webinar tonight. I'm also very honored to be joined by our speakers. This is Dr. Michael Haynes. He's practicing at the Jack Spine and Pain Centers in Jacksonville, Florida. By Dr. Matthew Maroney, he's practicing at the University of Florida in Gainesville. By Dr. Ira Kornbluth, he is the president of Clearway Pain Solutions, and he's stepping in for his colleague Damien Frears, who's unfortunately not available tonight. And we're also joined by Dr. Todd Sitzman. He's the medical director of Advanced Pain Therapies practicing in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Again, for our process throughout this webcast, you're going to see at the bottom of your screen the Q&A icon. Please submit any questions about the presentations using this feature. Again, please use the Q&A icon. We'll listen to all four presentations tonight, and we will answer the questions in order we have received them during this webcast. And those are, I think, the general technical questions. And I think we'll start tonight. Again, this is a very important topic. And again, welcome Dr. Haynes from Jacksonville, Florida, and he will be talking about how to find your dream practice.
Okay, so my name is Michael Haynes. I work at Jack Spine and Pain Centers, as well as Centurion Spine and Pain Centers, kind of all one company. I have a topic of how to find your dream practice. Honestly, I don't love the title, because I'll tell you the first thing is there probably is no dream practice, but you know, there are definitely things to look for to try to join an optimal practice for you, and how to avoid a nightmare practice. So I'm going to try to focus on things that help you guys figure out what is important for you, things to look for in a practice when you visit it, look it up online, or when you go for an interview, and also red flags to look for when you visit a practice, and types of resources you can use to find information on a practice. How do you know what is important to you in your first job out of fellowship, or any job for that matter? There's a couple things that you'll always hear, kind of like the top three things: location, lifestyle, and money are probably the top three things that people think about. I don't know if they're in any particular order, but I think location is super important for many reasons. This is an area you live in, and you might want to be close to family, or your spouse's family. What type of area is going to be where, depending on what the patient population is. What type of lifestyle do you want? Do you want something where you just show up, you know, at 8 o'clock, leave at 4 o'clock, and you're done for the day? You don't have to worry about anything else. You don't have to worry about marketing yourself. You don't have to worry about doing dinners. Those are all things to consider when you're looking at different practices. And that kind of goes along with practice type. Is it single practice? Do you start your own practice? Maybe. And that's going to be obviously probably a lot more work, especially at the beginning, especially for someone out of fellowship, where you're having to learn, continuing to learn the medical practice side of things, but also the billing, the insurance, the basic structure of a business. And then, you know, or do you want to go into academics, or join a larger group, or an orthopedics group, or maybe you don't have to worry as much about marketing yourself to get patients in the door. And then money. So Money is always a tricky one because obviously everybody wants to make a lot of money, but what is that amount that you want? There's always going to be somebody that's probably making more money than you, and if you try to compare yourself to everyone else, you'll never be happy. So, yeah, I don't know what the good advice is for that, but you set a number for yourself, because it probably doesn't work, because that number is probably going to change as you talk to other people. But I guess if anything, just keep that in mind, that you're always going to talk to people that are saying they're making X amount of money. First, you got to figure out, do you believe them or not? And does it even matter? Are they happy? Because these are all things that are relative to your situation. So here are some things that are important to look for when you are trying to grade a practice, or figure out if it's probably a quote unquote good practice. Number one, are they transparent? You may not be able to figure this out during an interview, but you can get a feel for it. Are they going to show you your numbers? When you talk to the physicians or administration, are they very open with you about how things are billed, what type of numbers you're going to be shown? I mean, shoot, they might even open up the books for you to some degree and kind of show you what you'd expect, show you other physicians' numbers. Also look at the physician retention rate. It may be hard to find out just by looking at their website, because anybody who's left won't be on the website anymore, but talk to as many people as you can, whether it's the industry reps that work in that area, other physicians, the staff members, anybody you might know in that area. I mean, it's a very close community, especially within, let's say, 100 miles of a practice. I mean, we all pretty much know each other and what the other practices are about. So if you talk to any of those other physicians that you know in that area, they should be able to give you some information as to what the general thought is about that specific practice. Staff satisfaction. So when you visit a group or shadow, don't just talk to the physicians, talk to the medical assistants, talk to the nurses, talk to the front desk checkout people, the billers, the surgery schedulers. Number one, you can get a good vibe just in terms of how they interact with you, but I mean, you want to make sure that the people and the support staff seem happy, because I think that can say a lot about a practice. You might want to look for, again, if this is important for you, if there's any opportunities for ownership or partnership, and also be careful. These two words can mean a lot of different things, but some examples of things that might be available are ownership in medical office buildings, ambulatory surgery centers, or the practice itself. And partnership doesn't always mean ownership. So, and I think none of these things are ever guaranteed. I mean, they could tell you, you'll become a partner in 2 years, or you'll have ownership in this or that in 2 years, but that might come with, there might be a cost to that. It may not be guaranteed, because you can't really guarantee those types of things to anybody until the time comes. So you never know what the financial situation is going to be, or how things are going to look in the practice until that opportunity is actually given to you. So those things are nice and things to look into, but be careful to put too much emphasis on that. Okay, so how do you avoid a nightmare practice? I think there are some key red flags, at least for me. Whenever I hear of a practice that's offering a ton of upfront money first year, you have to maybe question it a little bit as to why that is. Either, especially your first year, I don't think you necessarily want to have to see 60 patients a day, which I've heard of people walking into practices that way. on day one. It might be overwhelming, may not provide the best patient care. It could be dangerous to be seeing that much for anybody, let alone first day out of fellowship. Maybe could be some kind of weird billing going on. I don't know, but just because there's a lot of money offered, it might seem nice, but it could also be a red flag. Not always, but it could be. Obviously, like I said earlier, is there high physician turnover? That's a huge one. You can, again, Google the practice. Do they have any Department of Justice false claims allegations? Look up their physicians. Are they hiring non-board certified physicians? Because I think we all are very proud of being board certified or board eligible if you're still in fellowship. And, I personally think that I like to promote practices that hire board certified physicians. And there's a website, certificationmatters.org, that's pretty easy to look that stuff up, as well as like the ABA. Resources. So I brought up some of these before. Talk to anybody you can in that area, whether it's industry reps, physicians within that group, maybe some of the physicians that refer to that group. That's probably harder to get a hold of, but also physicians in that surrounding area. Cold call them. That physician in the neighboring city may not be hiring. We can at least say, well, I appreciate you talking to me. What do you think about this other group? I interviewed with them, and they can probably give you a lot of information. The advanced practice providers, the staff, use the internet as much as you can. Maybe even artificial intelligence might provide some information now. I haven't used that to look at practices yet. But another piece of advice I would give you is, just put yourself out there, talk to as many people as you can. I always tell this story when I was still in residency, and I was in a city doing a rotation that I was considering moving to. It wasn't Jacksonville where I'm at now, but any days off I had or I was post call, I put some nice clothes on, printed out my CV, and I literally went door to door to various pain practices and went to the front desk, handed them my CV, and asked if I could speak to administration or one of the physicians there, because I was looking for a job, knowing I was going into pain fellowship. I got a couple of job offers that way, but it also got me connected to people. And I don't hear about a lot of people doing that, but just getting out there. And you're gonna have to do that too when you get into practices, kind of just knocking on doors, shaking hands to meet other physicians in your area to refer you patients. So it's good practice for that, if anything. So in the end, there's a lot of different things you have to think about when you're looking at a practice. And a lot of that stuff you probably won't truly know until you get there. So it's hard to give all this information and say, here's what you need to know before you sign a contract. But there are some things that you can trust yourself with, kind of based on just your feel. Like when you interact with the people, you feel like you trust them. And I think that's very important. If you have any reservations, then you probably listen to yourself when you have those reservations about the people that you'll be working with. Are they transparent? There are definitely, depending on how transparent they are with you during the interview process, could potentially give you an idea of how transparent they'll be with you when you're working there. And is it going to be a fulfilling work environment? So like I said earlier, are the staff happy? Are the physicians happy? And you may or may not want to work with other physicians. I think, I got lucky that I've been with the same group since I've been out of fellowship 8.5 years ago. And it has been very fulfilling. And part of that has been because of the physicians I work with. on a daily basis. We're tech calling each other, asking questions, like academic questions about patient care, which, you know, that may not be available everywhere. And there's something to that, just continuing that educational process. It might sound silly, but there is a lot of fulfillment in continuing to learn, learning from your colleagues, and having that type of relationship with your peers that you work with on a daily basis. Maybe not even in the same office, but they're part of your group. It's almost like a little, you know, fraternity, and we all support each other, and we're all looking out for each other. And I think when you talk to a physician in that group, you'll get a feel of how well they work with each other. Like, you know, if they're trying to steal patients from each other, backstab each other, you know, that's obviously not a good environment. And I think you can get a feel for that when you talk to them. That's all I have.
Michael, thank you very much. And I think we are moving to the second presentation, which will be given by Dr. Maroney. And it will be, the topic is academic versus private practice. And again, we start setting up the presentation. And it looks good from my side. Matthew, welcome.
Good afternoon.
And go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So again, my name is Matthew Maroney. I'm an assistant professor at University of Florida. I'm going to focus on private versus academic kind of considerations, things that I would have liked to have known, and I have no disclosures. So I think it might be obvious, but jobs can vary incredibly, and even within these kind of you know, those sections, an academic job versus a private job, like an academic job itself can vary incredibly. My experience is specifically at University of Florida, but I have I have multiple friends doing pain elsewhere in other academic institutions, private. So I made an effort to talk to them and kind of add their experience into this to be a little bit more well-rounded. From a basic standpoint, I would say on average, though it's probably not a rule, when you're in the academic setting, your salary is generally going to be less. You know, what is that? I'm a big numbers person. I mean, I think in some cases it could be comparable. I mean, I've talked to some people that start off private practice. I mean, just like the prior presentation, you can start in private practice and you can get paid a whole lot, which may be a red flag, or there's usually a reason they're offering that much. Maybe it's just the location, or you might actually get paid like underpaid, and that's because it's a great opportunity, and you know they don't need to lure you in. So I mean, I've seen some people start in private with, you know, relatively low amount and less than academics. I would say on average, though, again, not significantly, but your hours are probably going to be a little bit less. You know, there's less likely you're going to be expected to be up till, you know, 8 or 9 at night finishing notes. Their call is going to be different. So, for example, if you're doing private practice, pain, you know, there might not be any specific call, or kind of like more like a phone call. Obviously, if you, depending on your practice, the kind of scary call that, you know, might want to raise your eyebrows a little bit is if someone's doing a lot of intrathecal pumps, so they do a lot of baclofen. Not that that's a bad therapy, but the call can be intense. You know, whenever the joke is, if you're on a baclofen pump or really any intrathecal pump and you get pulled to if that patient goes to the ER, I mean, there's a very good chance that ER doc or the admission internal medicine doc is going to reach out to you, because they're not going to want to touch the baclofen, you know, and rightfully so. I mean, you can kill somebody if you just turn it off accidentally, or if they get an MRI, which stops the pump. So, you know, that can really affect things quite a bit. Frequently in academics, if you're anesthesia background, you may do a percentage of anesthesia. Then it's very common for them to do some percentage of anesthesia calls. So I have friends in Texas that, you know, they do, you know, 3 or 4 to 5 overnight anesthesia calls a month on top of everything else. You know, if you're, you know, which could be good or bad, you can get paid for it. It's probably more common in academic to have some type of inpatient responsibilities. So like for here, I feel like we have a reasonable call system where, you know, if there's someone that's inpatient, we may be consulted about that. And that amount can vary quite a bit. I've talked to different programs that, there might be someone pretty much every weekend whenever you're on call every weekend. If you're on call, you're likely going to go in. That could be nearly 100%, and there's other ones that it's probably very unlikely. More specific things are just kind of the logistics, the hierarchy. From my experience, I'm learning more about this, but getting the ability to accomplish what you want to, which may be getting privileges for certain procedures, can change quite a bit. Like, for example, at UF, there's like multiple different signatures that we need to get privileges for different type of procedures, and depending on the atmosphere, the philosophy there, it might be reasonably easy, or it might be likely impossible. And for me, that was incredibly important, because we're doing, I would say, really awesome things here at UF, and I really enjoy what we're doing, and I'd be very disappointed if I could not do what I'm doing here. So I'm sure, I never considered that as a fellow. So you kind of, it's one thing to interview somewhere and they say, yeah, you can try to do X, Y, Z. Well, if no one's doing it, it's probably not likely that you're going to do it. If everybody's doing it, or if multiple people are doing a surgical procedure, whether it be like mild or Vertiflex, or stim, or like, for example, here at UF, like the PM&R guys, one of them I know wants to do spinal cord stimulator implants, but he just wasn't able to access that skill set, even though he already had it. So payment schemes, I would say academics more commonly salaried, though there's different situations where you might have a production, either a bonus where your actual end of year bonus is based off your production, which can be a lot or a little, or your entire salary can. I know people that are in kind of an academic setting where they're completely RVU based, and there's positives and negatives to that. My friend that's on it, he likes it for some reasons, because the harder you work, the more money you make, and there's that kind of excitement, and you feel like you're kind of you're getting paid for your time. But historically, what may happen at different speeds is that, or the negative of it is that every year, if you surpass your RVU goal, then they're likely going to increase that. How aggressively can vary. So, initially it may sound great, and then, at year 5, they've raised it so high that it's almost impossible to reach. And then the scenario is that you're working, you're not taking vacation because you're trying to make your RVU goal, because if you don't make your RVU goal, you won't get your bonus. And then there's this stress and anxiety along those lines. And these are real things that affect your family life situation. I've specifically spoken to multiple people. My practice doesn't have a really significant RVU component, and I love that, because I can go home and I don't feel this pressure that I need to do X, Y, Z. I can play with my kids, and that's really important to me. Vacation. So there's a huge difference between you get vacation versus can you use the vacation. So, I would say in academics, it's more understood that you have a vacation time and you can use it. You won't be shamed or guilted to not use it. But again, if you have an RVU bonus, or you're in like a group that's really, I would say, aggressive, you may have that time, but in actuality, you don't get to use it. And I have a really good friend that's in private practice, and he's taken, in the last 2 or 3 years, he's taken a total of like a week and a half off just because he can't do it. So I would say academics is quite a bit more comfortable. I may have a academic bias because I really like my job, but so I guess take that with a grain of salt. Other things is, conference days, education time. It's common that in private you'll get 0, maybe a few days, versus academic you may get a week up to a few weeks, and that's it is pretty awesome in a sense where you don't you can use this time, you can go learn, go travel, you can network, and you're not again, you don't feel guilty that you're doing some you're losing money or all these things. So there's something about that emotional satisfaction, and you can kind of just be in the moment, and that's kind of what life's about, I feel like. So we're, I would say, very heavily surgical here. So, a big thing for us is how much OR time, block time can you get? Again, it's one thing to say, yeah, you can do surgeries. It's another thing if you can, you have access to a block of OR time once every 2 months. You could, you can do one surgical procedure every few months. That's not really doing it. If you have access to monthly or weekly, OR time, then you can build this practice that you want, if you want to be very procedural heavy, which is very important to me and very important to most of the people I work with, or really all of them. let's see, one of the big kind of, exciting things you hear about are, investing in ASC or investing in, a practice. I mean, so you're probably a little bit more restricted in an academic setting. There's not an ASC that it's gonna be the hospital owned. So I mean, I don't have that option. I don't really care, but I mean, if you're really financially savvy, some people like pursuing those things. Separate things, again, it sounds like not a big deal, but like, there's certain people that they work for, on the side for Abbott or St. Jude, St. Jude, all these different things, and they'll kind of help, network and advertise for different products. And I mean, I've never done it. I don't really care. But I mean, I've heard people have made hundreds of thousands of dollars doing those things, and so, it's not a little thing in situations, or that amount of money. One of the kind of more recent thought process, when COVID hit, and like, I talked to people that were, had jobs lined up, and when COVID hit, those clinics shut down, and then they weren't able to get a job initially because COVID and this pandemic, and everybody was kind of scared. And I remember I approached the chair of the anesthesia department, kind of just semi-joking, asking how stable or how likely, or what's the chance that I could lose my job because of things slowing down. And I forgot exactly what he said, but he pretty much said there would have to be a nuclear war for us to for our job to be in jeopardy. Partially because we do anesthesia, but it's one thing I just don't have to worry about. This is a slide that actually is part of my offer letter. I took all the numbers out and whatnot, but I think it's important to show that, at a big institution, there's a lot of, beyond the salary, there's a lot of benefits that are hard to wrap your head around. And so you can see here, it's, let's see, there's a call component, I can work overtime. There's all these different incentives, completing my call. Let's see, productivity incentive, that's kind of an RVU thing. Research incentive, education incentive, faculty retention bonus. They contribute to my retirement. They pay my health insurance. They pay my life insurance. They pay my malpractice, long-term disability, death and dismemberment. So long story short, there's all these perks that, if you maximize them, like you use all your conference time, you do all these things, like, they pay for my children's health insurance, arguably these benefits are potentially worth over 100 grand. Again, my base salary is going to be substantially less. So again, I'm not trying to say that this is like perfect and everything like that. There's a lot of people that make a lot more than me, but when you're evaluating it, you can't just look at those two numbers. You can't just look at salary, because this, I mean, I'm not joking. All this, I mean, I try to maximize everything, and it's pretty substantial. So though I make less than someone in private, it's not that much less considering all of this. So things to expect in your daily life, that, again, these things really make a big difference for me. You're going to work, potentially going to have mid-levels, nurse practitioners, PAs. If you have a pretty stable practice, you're going to have people that are with you for a long time. I would guess, academics are probably more stable. We have NPs that have been with us for many, many years. It makes a huge difference in their ability to help, because they really know what you do, what you don't do, your style of things, versus having someone that's kind of like just fills in and there's turnover and doesn't know anything. And I mean, which can kind of complicate things if they they start kind of talking about things that you're not comfortable with, or medications. It can affect your day quite a bit. Obviously, if they offer something you don't like to do or you don't want to do, then you have to kind of backtrack, and that can affect things. In most settings, you're going to have, like, some management. This can make or break situations. Again, I think our department's really, really good. We have office management that really help us a lot. You may be in a setting where, the people that kind of help run things, they're more worried about the bottom line, making money. And where that can come into play is that, they may kind of not be very supportive of you doing things that make, they'll be most supportive of you pursuing procedures and medications that just make the most money. They won't really care as much if things. So it might be harder to get, support to get certain things scheduled. From a management standpoint, this can really come into play if you're trying to pursue more high risk things or surgeries, because the reality of pursuing new procedures and surgeries is that you're gonna be slow at first. The more dangerous it is, the slower you will be. For some of the procedures and surgeries we do here, I was very slow at some of them because I was being very conservative and I was really trying to be overly safe. The reason that's important is that like I probably lost money considering how slow I went on the first few attempts I did at specific surgeries, and my efficiency has improved probably about 80% on some of these things, like my OR time. You might not have the potential to do that in certain situations because someone might not want to invest that much time in you. Maybe not. Again, scheduling admin work. So having, this is true for anything, but like having a group that has specific dedicated people that kind of schedule and coordinate and do the logistics is huge. So, if I can just send a message to somebody and be like, hey, can you help schedule this person? And they already kind of know how to do it and troubleshoot some things. It's very, very convenient versus, you having to be involved in the nitty-gritty details of who to schedule with what, and again, so you kind of just focus on what you want to do. And on top of that, there's going to be a lot of patient questions. The more digital everything gets, the more likely there's going to be some way that the patients can access you or try to access you and ask you questions. And obviously patients will try to ask, they'll ask as much as you'll give. And, as far as they're concerned, they'll frequently they'll if they can get away with doing the full clinic appointment through messaging, they'll do it. So you kind of have to have some people to kind of help you troubleshoot those things, answer kind of simple questions, whether it be messages. I mean, we use Epic, there's like MyChart, but that makes a huge, like when one of our people are out and they can't help us, you get this influx of messages. I mean, you can spend a weekend doing it. Let's see, referral sources. So again, the nice thing about probably big institutions, academics, is that you potentially can have a pretty big referral source. You don't have to worry about advertising, but that can affect what you may or may not do. If all your referrals are from neurosurgery and the neurosurgical department doesn't want you to particularly be surgical, then that affects things. But if you have them coming from a variety of places and you don't feel that pressure, that can be relatively probably a little bit better. I would say at UF we have a pretty good relationship with neurosurgeons, but if you're in a small practice, you might have to be the one that's knocking on doors and establishing these relationships, and that's fine. But it's a lot of responsibility, and it could be fun, but it's something to consider. I mean, if you're starting a practice or joining someone that's small, you may have to every week be that might be part of your life for weeks or months or years, which is fine. It's just, if that's a day a week or a half a day a week, that's part of the equation of evaluating a job. This is kind of specific, but it's important for us. Since we're at a big university, we have sovereign immunity, which pretty much means that it's a lot harder to sue us for something that happens. There's a cap to how much you can sue us. Not that we get sued on a regular basis, but again, if the more dangerous you're doing, the more dangerous the surgical procedures you're doing, the more this is a concern. You may not want to pay for malpractice insurance because of the amount it costs, independently. But at a big institution, it's part of your kind of benefits. Like I don't have to even consider it. So I feel very comfortable here. I mean, not that we have really bad outcomes or anything like that, but I might lose a little bit more sleep pursuing some of the things we're doing if I knew that someone could kind of sue me for everything I have. So some people specifically go to academic institutions to train, to get better, to pursue very dangerous things for just that specific reason. So finally, the negatives, I know I kind of thought about the positives, but there's definitely an income ceiling. There's not a lot of negotiation. Even if I'm like the most productive person at the university, I can't, if I go up to the chair and say, I want more money, he's just going to say no. You don't really get a yearly raise for the most part, or if you do, it's usually less than inflation. So again, money's, I would say, notably lower. You're gonna likely at an academic institution, you're gonna have to train people. Training people is a skill. I am still every week trying to get better at dealing, how to teach people, how to teach different personalities, how to like give constructive criticism without crushing someone's soul. I mean, that's hard. So on the flip side of that is that the patients have to deal with trainees. So, I mean, if you have brand new fellow and they are obviously brand new, a patient's going to notice that, and that, some of your more uncomfortable conversations are going to be with patients because they're going to, they might have received a more painful injection and they know why, but they also know they're at a training institution. A big negative again is the messages, the epic messages. The expectation is that we kind of respond to these messages, and at least at different practices they might not have so much access to you. Just like anywhere else, you're going to have staff turnover, so you're going to have to train people, which may or may not be a big issue. I mean, obviously, we put a lot of effort into keeping our kind of pain family happy, but you might be responsible for training, new staff, or even if you have new residents every month, you're teaching the same person just how to write a note. It's kind of frustrating sometimes. You're likely not going to have scribes, which can save you so much time. If you want to change the institution, it's nearly impossible, but it's possible compared to working with like one other person. You can make a change the day of. Your investment opportunities are going to be less. Your potential to make extra income outside your job is less. You're going to have to be responsible for doing secondary, presentations, or lessons for your fellows, which could be, evenings, weekends, whatever it may be. There may be a research expectation, and that may or may not, there may be very little, or there may be, dozens or many dozens of hours a year, with deadlines, which can be stressful. I know people that they're 1099 and they can write off many thousands of dollars for travel or tools or whatever it may be. Not an option. And one situation that may make or break you is your non-compete. Like, again, I don't really worry about this, but if I had to leave, like pretty much for me to like get a different job, if I left University of Florida, it's like a 50-mile non-compete radius from like potentially every UF building, which pretty much covers the majority of the state. So I mean, I would like when people leave here, which I've seen people, I mean, a lot of them are leaving the state because these buildings are so spaced out that like if so it's kind of a risk. You start working at some place and that's where you want to be. Well, if you leave it, like you might be out of luck for 2 years pretty much. And again, when you're planning for your future, it's a pretty big deal. I know that was kind of fast, but that's what I have.
Thank you, Matthew, for your presentation, academic versus private practice. And I think we can move forward, and we're going to have Ira Kornbluth again stepping in for Damien Frears, talking about how you're going to evaluate your private practice offer.
Good evening. Thanks for the intro. It's an honor to be here with you tonight. A quick disclaimer, as he mentioned, I'm filling in for Damien. Damien's my colleague and partner, long-term friend. He asked me late this afternoon to fill in. I was on the way to have dinner with my mother, and I'm in her house in the African room where they have a lot of artifacts. I haven't seen the slides. I didn't design the slides, but I'll give a little bit about background, and then we can talk about how to evaluate your future private offer. So different perspective than the last speaker who did a great job. I started practice, finished my fellowship in 2004, joined National Spine. I was there for 4 years, became a partner, and was the first doc to ever leave National Spine. I started my own practice, grew my practice to several locations, number of surgery centers, hired a bunch of docs, was active with private equity in 2017. Actually, Damien's practice and mine merged in 2017 with private equity backing for the practice, and transacted again to a bigger private equity buyer in 2019 with a practice that was based in Florida, formed Clearway, now in multiple states. My understanding is we're the biggest pain practice in the country. One of the many hats I wear is development. I choose the new sites along with the rest of the executive team. And I'm the point person for recruiting and hiring providers, mid-levels as well as docs. So I've hired a lot of docs over my time, missed on a few, but hired a lot of great docs. And I can give some perspective to you guys as you're considering moving past your fellowship into practice. Some of this will be a little bit duplicitous with the prior speakers, but listed here are a number of very important factors in choosing private practice. Location, of course, is important. You want to understand if you'd be happy in a rural, urban, or suburban setting. And is this a location in which you can grow roots? Also, if it's a practice like ours with multiple locations, will you be going to one or two office locations, or will you be going to a different location frequently? Are you going to have roots, be able to establish yourself in one or two locations? Many docs like to be in two because there's different setting during the course of the week. There's some cross-pollination with more doctors, more referral sources. You get an interface with different staff. The process may be slightly different from office to office. Beyond two locations, I tend to think it's orienting for doctors, especially young doctors. So I would make sure you understand what locations you'll probably be going to and whether the pattern of the practice is to send you to multiple different places. Of all the factors listed here, I think culture is really the most important. You want to get a good sense of the culture and whether you'll fit into that culture. I wouldn't spend time looking at websites that have comments or comments from patients. Websites where staff that left or patients that left can disparage individual providers of the practice. That's a biased set. I would spend more time talking to industry colleagues, spend time speaking to spinal cord stimulator and other vendors because they have some inside knowledge into the practice, how the practice works administratively, how the doctors are not just in the practice. Sometimes they go out to dinner with the docs and marketing events and the docs a little bit better. And then the colleagues that you're going to have, are these colleagues that you are going to meld with, would focus mostly on the younger docs because those are the ones that have had the most recent experiences in the practice. They seem like they're having a good experience. Are they growing? Are they happy? I would also, more so than anything, try to spend a few hours considering observing the operations of the practice. Staff seem happy. Do the patients seem happy? Do the doctors seem overwhelmed? Do they have good support? Those factors should really be the most important in your decision. Salary is important. Respectfully speaking, I think some of the other speakers mentioned this. I think the first year salary is a big focus of people coming out of fellowship. It's almost an important ego element. And I would encourage you to think of compensation along a longer continuum, at least 3 to 5 years versus how much money I can make in the first year. And it can be a red flag if salary is too good to be true. And I've seen this many times. There's a reason why that practice is offering a compensation level well above norm. Maybe they don't understand the business or they're desperate. And once they recognize that they're not making the money off of the position they thought they were going to in the business model falling apart, then the relationship with the doctor can sour. They can bring someone else in who would be able to perform the duty at a lesser price. And these things do happen in business and so forth. So the salary is very important, but it shouldn't be the primary factor in the practice. And the partnership potential, and what does partnership mean? Because partnership means different things in different practices, and different doctors want different things in partnership. Is this a partnership in which you are going to have a say at the table, or you're just going to money in and get distribution? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a subsequent slide, as well as leadership and growth opportunities within the organization. There are essentially 4 different primary ways to compensate doctors, and there are other models as well, but these are the primary ones. There's a fixed salary model. In our practice, we give a fixed salary for the first year because we're ramping up, and beyond that, we incentivize our docs and pay them based on production. I think most docs do well in an incentive-based model. At least a significant component of the compensation to be an incentive component. It really aligns the practice with the doc. The doc gets rewarded for his or her work. The harder the doc works, more not only the practice makes, but also the doc makes. Fixed salary model, the doc could be working harder and the doc is bringing home the same amount of compensation. There are RVU-based models, which work well in certain settings as well. I would understand not only the model, but the percentage, if there is an incentive component, in how that aligns with other practices in the area, in the industry norm. Most practices offer partnerships somewhere around 3 years. We have in our practice offered people ability to buy into surgery centers and other aspects of partnerships sooner if they really are great docs. They're well in the practice, they're growing. We think they're going to be with us for a long time. They're good producers. So anything beyond 4 years, I think, is in management realm, and oftentimes it should be 3 years or thereabouts. The most important point here is understanding the track record of other junior physicians and how long it took them to become a partner, and what was involved with them becoming a partner, and then how transformative was it for them becoming a partner. Were they just becoming a partner in name, or did they have the ability to influence the practice after they became a partner? And then how is the partnership being offered? Is there a buy-in? And there typically is. And what's the methodology behind calculation? I believe that the buy-in should not be cost prohibitive, and I believe that the buy-in should allow the young doc to benefit along with the practice, and it shouldn't be looking to, be overly greedy and having a young doctor buy to partnership. We found over time that ASC ownership is a very attractive element for doctors, and they really appreciate the ability to buy into the ASCs in which they are regularly performing cases. And this allows docs to receive tangible rewards for the work that they're putting in. We give docs, assuming that the ASCs are profitable and we run profitable surgery centers, we give docs monthly distributions, which really reinforces the fact that they're doing a good job, and incentivizes them to continue to want to be busy and bring to the surgery center. In owning a surgery center, there does need to be a buy-in for compliance reasons, and the practice can influence the formula for the buy-in. For us, we try to make the buy-in as low as possible. We're not trying to make money off of our doctors buying into the surgery center. We're looking to align with our doctors, incentivize them to be profitable. We all make money together. So there's different ways to think about that. The ASC ownership, I think, is becoming a more mainstream way of incentivizing and retaining doctors. What does the mentorship look like in the practice? How do you learn a new skill? In our practice, we have some docs that spend time training newer docs or even experienced docs who want to learn new procedures. In Maryland, for example, we have a doc who's great at doing some of the more advanced procedures, and one of his key roles is to go around, train other doctors, sign off for QA reasons that they're competent to do procedures. So, for example, if we hire a doctor who learned spinal cord stimulator trials while in fellowship, had some exposure, didn't get on enough doing implants, our doc would go spend time with the new doc, make sure the doc was comfortable, sign off on it, and allow that doc to do. Similarly, if a doctor wasn't trained to do Intercept or mild or any of the other more advanced procedures, they an interest, we'll train that to do those procedures. Mentorship also beyond just the clinical realm. There's a lot that comes at young docs in practice. Docs are well trained medically, but in private practice, in the first couple of months, I've seen some docs struggle a little bit. There's consideration for how to manage complex patients, and you no longer have an attending behind you. You are the attending. How to interface with staff, how to work with referral sources, industry, your colleagues, having some good mentors guiding you along the way could really smooth your path to practice. Then what exposure do you have into the business elements of the practice? Are you going to be able to see and learn some of the business medicine of management? And is this a practice where if you show the ability to be a good leader, are you going to have the path to be able to be put in a position to lead in some capacity? Other things to think about when you're signing or considering a private practice offer: is there a sign-on bonus? Oftentimes, this can be a point of negotiation. Is there moonlighting opportunity? Docs tend to want this, and then they'll anesthesia, once a month, but it's still important to think about if you're considering it, because practices oftentimes will allow that in a contract. What amount of vacation do you have? What restrictions are there on vacation? May be a point of discussion. It's certainly something you want to understand, because tail can be rather expensive if you leave a practice. My understanding is many practices, not all, will cover tail in certain circumstances. And then the non-compete, I would think in smaller practices, you have a greater ability to negotiate a non-compete versus larger practices where if everyone has already signed on to the same non-compete, it may be a point where there is room to negotiate. So thank you again for your time tonight. I look forward to being on the panel, and good luck in your search.
Well, Ira, thank you very much, and thank you for stepping in ad hoc for Damien. We really appreciate it. This is an important topic, and especially with your background, building practices, having hired, I think, dozens of faculty of our colleagues, and what they're looking for, and what can work and what cannot work. I think we'll like to move to the last presentation, and this is Dr. Todd Sitzman. Todd, thank you very much for joining us, and I guess it's all yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Renee. Okay, pull it up here. Let me know if you see my screen.
Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great, guys. Thank you. I'm going to be speaking a little bit more on nuts and bolts of some of the financial aspects of a first-year practice, and things that you should think about if you haven't thought about them, and some things that occur behind the scenes in your day-to-day practices that you're currently in. some financial basics. I've got no industry conflicts to disclose. Whereas my private practice in South Mississippi, Hattiesburg, it's approximately 90 miles from New Orleans, 90 miles from Mobile, and 90 miles from Jackson. It's a semi-rural area, but decent population, 46,000 individuals, but the catchment area is more of like 250,000 individuals. Demographics are mixed population, very low income. Cost of living is much lower than most places in the United States. Home costs are much lower by 2022 standards. Where it stands out is the demographics of health disparity. We're the number one in poverty, number two in obesity, number one in diabetes, worst in life expectancy, disability, and very few physicians per capita. So the need is there. Now, can you run a practice in this type of setting? That's the question you should ask yourself. Everyone wants to go to places like Scottsdale and nice metropolitan areas where there's activities, but a lot of competition in those areas. So you should think outside of that if you want to establish your own practice. I've got a practice that's outpatient based. It's 6,500 square foot office building with its own surgery suite, 4 exam rooms, 2 pre-op areas, 2 post-op bays, fluoroscopic suite, and administrative offices. So similar to most in surgery centers and most modern office-based practices. My practice, I've been here for 21 years. I've seen individually myself 19,500 patients. As of today, 19,501. On average, 30 plus patients per day. It's been increasing recently. The mean age is 63. I see just about everything there is to see, you name it. And we see it for chronic pain. Payer mix is poor by most standards, by most city standards, I guess. 64% Medicare, 21% commercial, and 15% workers' comp and self-pay. Now, everyone's thinking, well, you got 21% commercial. Give me pure Medicare any day over commercial. And in my area, commercial tends to pay at Medicare rates or below Medicare rates. And this does not include, the commercial does not include the Medicare Advantage plans. It just includes your United Healthcare plans and your Aetnas and things like that, and insurers like that. So what do you have to think of as a business owner and someone who starts a practice? It's a different mindset. You have to think of, it has to be profitable, and it may not be profitable from day one, but your long-term goal date at the end of your first year, second, third year, you should definitely look at profit as your motivation and incentive to continue practice. Well, it's revenue minus expense. So that one equation is what will drive your practice. Revenue minus expense. But medical practices, unlike other producers, unlike other sales manufacturers, we don't set our practice. We don't set our prices, rather. It's not a free market. We're told what we're going to be, what we can charge. We're told what we can collect. So that part of the equation never changes, the revenue. We can only control the expenses. And I'm going to spend a lot of time today discussing some of the expenses to consider as you move through your practice. So these expenses are, when you're first starting, and you should start up at least 9 months ahead of time before considering opening a practice. You really have to think these things through. So whether you want to lease, whether you want to have a mortgage, if you do lease, you have to have a build out as a capital expense, your furnishings, your computers, your EHR, your setup. My supplies are always categorized as the 3 C's, the clinical, clerical, and cleaning expenses in the supplies. And those 3 supplies are really they can vary from month to month depending on your patient volume. Fluoroscopy unit, you have to decide whether you want to lease versus own. Your utilities every month, internet, phone systems, electricity, water, sewer, common area maintenance, electronic health records, security alarm systems, things that you, if you're not used to paying for these in your business, you'll soon learn that the commercial charges for the same services you get at home are often twice as much. So you're saying, how come I'm paying high-speed capacity internet this price at home, but in my business, they're charging me 3 times more for the same bandwidth, for the same everything? Because they can, and they do, and they will. And the same thing for your electricity. You will pay twice as much for a commercial electric plan as you do for your residential. So other expenses, your insurances, your professional liability, business overhead, umbrella policies. If you maybe not at first when you start up, but you have to think about staff, medical, dental, and covering some of their insurances. Staffing itself, you're looking at an experienced front desk individual, nurses, medical assistant, contractual services can be office cleaning service, your accounting, payroll, billing services if you outsource that, your IT services, your transcription services if you're doing transcription. Now let's look at break down some of these 3 C's I talked about. Your clinical supplies. You're going to need your needles, your trays, your RF equipment, your steroids, your local anesthetics, your contrast agents. Those of us in business, we're floored at the expense of contrast over the years. And I looked at it when I first started 21 years ago. I paid $69 for a box of 10 IsaView M300s. For the same box of IsaView M300 with 10 milliliter bottles, it's $1,500. No rhyme or reason for that. That's just what it is. So costs have gone up tremendously over the years. Clerical supplies, your printer, paper, your toners, your pens, paper clips, folders, anything that has to do with clerical issues, your cleaning supplies. Your cleaning contractor often will not bring these in. You have to supply them yourselves. Everything from your toilet tissues, your floor cleaner, your window cleaner, bathroom cleaners. Taxes. Your accountant can help set this up, and I would recommend if you're not familiar with running a business, at least contract with an accountant who is used to business startups who can walk you through it and assist you with these things, because it's important not only to maintain compliance with federal regulations, but also so that you're not caught with a surprise at the end of the year that you've paid in monthly, you've paid in your 940 or 941s in your state withholding taxes on a monthly basis. So that at the end of the year, you're not saying, wow, I owe this much. And your county property taxes, your privilege taxes. Even in my small town, I get charged a privilege tax, 1%, because I'm a healthcare provider of my gross revenues. Business personal property tax. You say to yourself, well, what is that? Well, for every computer I buy in the office, for every desk, every lamp, every fluoroscopy machine, the county sends an assessor every year to do an inventory. I send them an Excel spreadsheet of the inventory and then they literally tax me on the property that I've owned year after year after year. And this is common. This is what occurs in every state. Some miscellaneous expenses you should think about: the licensures and dues for societies, pest control, AC and heat maintenance if you own your building, shredding capabilities, and radiation dosimetry for your fluoroscopy suite and for your staff, banking fees, credit card processing, advertising. Even if it's a website, it's going to cost. Now let's look at some of how those expenses play into these financial aspects of your practice that you really should think about. Now, the three the three financial statements that are going to be most important to you are going to be the income statement, which will answer the question, is your practice profitable? Your balance sheet, meaning is it stable over time? And your cash flow really tells us a lot. At the end of 1 or 2 years, your cash flow will determine whether or not your practice will survive. Let's look at this income statement. Income, like I said earlier, income is revenue minus expense. That's the equation. Revenue is what you earn in services. Expenses, historically, for most businesses, it's cost of the products you're selling. But we're not selling products; we're selling services. So it's the cost of your services essentially. Overhead, cost to run your business. These are your major big expenses. So once again, your expenses are your overhead costs, and you look at it in two types of costs. Your variable cost, which will increase or decrease depending on the level of your patient activity, your clinical activity. So the more procedures you do, the more needles and needle kits and IsoView and steroids you're going to use. If you work long hours, the variable cost will be staffing issues. Your fixed costs don't change over time, and that's going to be your mortgage or your lease. Utilities really don't change, or EHR won't change very much. Just insurances aren't going to change at all. Cleaning supplies aren't going to change at all. So those are your fixed costs. But even in my small one-physician practice in South Mississippi, in 5 years, I've seen my expenses increase nearly 200%. And that's something that I'm sure is happening nationwide. So your balance sheet, you have to look at the balance sheet are the assets of your practice. And those are your liabilities plus your equity. And it tells us if your business is healthy. So your assets are your cash on hand in your bank account, your accounts receivable, hopefully within 90 days, you're going to receive that money, those monies, any inventory you have on hand, and any real property that's appreciated over time. When you first start, the real property and the equipment are going to be liabilities because you may have a mortgage on them, or you may have a line of credit loan on them. So initially, your liabilities will probably exceed the equity you have in them, but over time that will change. That will reverse itself, and you'll have a positive balance sheet. Cash flow. When you first start a practice, unless you've saved a lot of money, or unless you've inherited a lot of money, you will have to take out a line of credit, or at least to start your practice. So speak with your banker, make sure you get favorable terms. You'll probably spin down that line of credit. That will be your cash flow initially. But after a year or two, you want your cash flow to be positive. You don't want to lose money month after month. You want to maintain it. And unfortunately, you can only maintain it if your revenue exceeds your expenses. So look at that very, very closely. I'm trying to be optimistic. It can be done. There are very unique ways of doing it. And it has nothing to do with denying care or denying any one individual, as I said, or any different type of insurers. But if you recall what I said before, Medicare, for example, is, in my practice, a more favorable patient than a United Healthcare patient. Not only are we reimbursed better, I don't have to get prior authorization. I know what the LCDs are. I know, I know how to treat these patients, and they don't have to come back multiple times. So those three financial statements are going to be important. Income statement, are you profitable? Balance sheet, are you stable? Cash flow, will you survive? I hope that this talk at least gives you some insight into some of the economics of your practice. Some challenges that I faced when I first started and what I continue to still face are payment cuts. We have no control over those. If you're in private practice now, it's as far as office-based practice, even physician reimbursement is going to go down 3.5% this year, plus some restricted payer policies, high specialist copays, higher deductibles, restricted guidelines, third-party reviews, third-party retrospective reviews with clawbacks. They want their money back after you've already done the procedure and already been paid. Limited formularies, calls, appeals. A lot of the time, and this time is valuable, not only to your staff, but to yourself. We do spend an inordinate amount of time on unreimbursed non-clinical tasks that, in my opinion, have to be minimized as best you can. Patients are never going to understand what goes on behind the scenes. You'll always be the physician who makes a ton of money, and that how dare you not take my insurance, and how dare my copay not be enough to cover all of your expenses. But it's not, and you have to educate your patients and do it in a very diplomatic way, and but understand that they're never going to understand the finances of running a medical practice if you do it yourself. I wish you all the best in starting your practice in the future. But even if you're going to work for someone else, you should make yourself aware of the expenses of the practice and see which ways that you can cut expenses, because your income depends on minimizing expenses. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you very much for this important information and the insight into your decades of practicing and seeing the different changes. I think this is information. I always say you can't write in a book or manuscript. You just have to talk to someone who's living it, like you, and like Ira, Matthew, and Michael. So I think thank you for the presentations. I would like to get our panel back. I call it online, or with the video on, if you can. I know everyone is busy, and we can look at the questions posted in the Q&A feature. So the first one is, it's a general question. If one does not do any pain for 2-3 years, is it hard for them to get a job in private practice after 2 to 3 year hiatus? Who wants to answer that? Ira, is that something for you when you look at applicants, future colleagues?
Yeah, I would, if I had the choice between somebody who's been active in practice and somebody who had a 2 to 3 year hiatus, I would probably choose the person who's been active in practice, unless there's a very good reason why somebody would. If it was just they were disinclined to do pain management for a couple of years, I would tend to think that they're not very passionate about the field and would choose another candidate.
Well, I can weigh in, I would probably come from the academic side. I do agree with you, it's as long as there's a reason, then I would say it's okay. If there's no good reason and things like that, then have to be careful. And for the future colleagues, so the fellows on this talk, you have to understand when you hire someone, it's a big investment and a risk you take on. So we look from the other side, I want a job, and the employer side, academic, private, small group, big group, is always the negative one or the greedy one who wants to abuse you. But you have to understand, if you hire someone, imagine I would be a single practice person, and I'm going to expand, we're going to hire another one. So I'm going to double up. I'll double up the risks. I don't know if you're going to be profitable, if you're going to, like Todd said, survive. So both sides have to understand this process. So those are my comments on that when we decide to hire someone, because if it goes wrong, or you hire the wrong people, and honestly, it doesn't matter if you're academic or private community practice, you will go out of business. So academic has a lot of the same pressures than any other medical practices. So it's not the ideal situation. We're not living on an island. So I can just weigh in to that. So I think we can move along. So this is a personal preference questions, with the tax forms. Do you recommend a 1099 versus a W-2?
I can say something real quick about this. Obviously I'm not an accountant, but I've talked to accountants. In our practice, I'm one of the owners, and all of us still are W-2. From everybody I've talked to, there's really no advantage. Everything you can write off on 1099, you can write off W-2. There might be a few exceptions, but it's just more of a pain in the butt, really, to do 1099. So I guess that's my 2 cents.
My understanding too is the IRS is very much going to scrutinize or potentially scrutinize 1099s. So there are clear rules about who qualifies for a 1099 and who doesn't qualify for 99. So I would consult with a tax advisor if you're going to 1099.
Thank you for answering. And we can move to the question from Dr. Desai. And he says he's a neurology resident. He's applying for pain medicine. Do anesthesia trained residents are favored more than neurology trained residents? I mean, I can answer that from the training programs. I would say the bottom line is, for example, from UF, I may say we have matched most specialty who can sit for the pain boards. That's neurology, ER medicine, anesthesia, PM&R, and I think even psychiatry. The other programs may be more open, others more limited. It's also based on their experience. So the bottom line is neurology is a relatively newer specialty coming into pain medicine. So you have to go up a little bit the mountain. But the bottom line is it's doable, and it will be more and more accepted, or that also program directors becoming more aware that neurology are also going to be making excellent pain physicians. For my private colleagues, I don't know if they want to weigh in, if they're looking at what's your training or residency background, how you assess an applicant, Todd or Ira or Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I could say probably, unfortunately, there is some bias. Just in our practice, we are almost all anesthesiologists. I don't think we purposely, we don't purposely make any effort to hire anesthesiology trained pain physicians, but there probably is some bias there. But I would say ultimately the number one thing is your references. So if who you were trained under, people you've worked for previously, if you have good references, somebody that we know personally that can vouch for you and say you're good, no matter what your primary specialty is, that's the most important thing. So that's what I would say about that.
I do agree. Depends on the circumstances. Someone else wants to weigh in. Otherwise, I'll move to the next question. And I read it out loud. Is there any concern or considerations for joining a practice that went from private and sold to private equity?
I'll take that one since we're private equity backed. So I first transacted with private equity in 2017, and then subsequently transacted with private equity in 2019. And all of the docs that were with us in 2017 are still with us. One doc left and is in the process of coming back. So there has not been the attrition. Our private equity situation has been great for us. It doesn't always go great though. I know plenty of stories where practices that were backed by private equity went sideways or even south. I think it depends on the partners that you have in the relationship and understanding that you have of them and they have of you in the business. Some private equity partners don't allow the executive team to function. They more micromanage the executive team. That has not been the case with us at all. And some private equity partners are just looking at the dollars and not thinking about the clinical component. In our practice, we're led and directed by doctors, even though we have private equity backing. So it's the right formula for us. We have lots of docs that want to join us because our formula has worked, but I think this is one of those points that candidate needs to really understand if they're considering a practice that's backed by private equity.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so our group is not backed by private equity, but we've been growing quickly. And, some of the concerns of our newer physicians is always, they're under the assumption we're going to be selling soon. And, I mean, it's possible, if somebody writes a good check, but, growing without private equity, just as, physician-owned group and having, we have administration and the CEO, but there's a lot of growing pains. And then there's a lot of things I'm like, we could probably be doing this better if we had private equity involved, because that's what they do. They're good at growing practices. So I think, just like Ira said, it depends on the situation, what group you're in, the physicians, and what private equity group is owning it. Because I think some practices might run better with private equity backing, and some might not. So it's I don't think there's a straightforward answer to that question.
All right, thank you. I think we can move to the next question. This from Dr. Cushman. She's asking, well, she was told that workman compensation pays 3 times more than Medicare.
That's not true. It depends on your state. Your state sets the fee schedule for workers' compensation, and it's usually published annually, and it's so it varies by state.
I do agree, and there are also certain documentation requirements. I'm moving to the next question. This is from Dr. Lopez, and he's asking Dr. Sitzman, after a market analysis of a specific region, would you recommend purchasing real estate or leasing?
My personal feeling is purchasing if you're able to do it. If you find the right location, at the right price, it's always better to purchase if you want to stay there for any long term. It's probably been one of my better investments in life, is purchasing my building. And even when you stop practicing, if you don't want to sell your practice, you can at least lease it out, and you can make passive income years from now. It comes with some responsibilities you have to maintain. You've got to pay all of your expenses associated with it. But to me, it's the way to go if you're going to be there 15 years. Gentlemen, would you agree?
Yeah, I can tell you that my first office I purchased, my wife is a commercial real estate broker. So, I'm active in the real estate market, have bought some other properties for the practice. My guiding principle, because I'm in charge of growth and development for our practice, is first and foremost finding the best spot for the practice, irrespective of whether it's a purchase opportunity. If we are going to purchase, everything's kosher. Now that we're backed by private equity, there's fair market value assessment. We need to make sure we're charging fair market value rent if the property is going to be owned by individuals who are partners in the business. I think my bias is towards purchase as well, if you have the vision that you're going to be there for multiple years. But interest rates are higher now, and you need to be sensitive to market forces, interest rates, and the cost of property.
My few cents, I would say yes, if you have the funds and if you're sure about the location and you want to be practicing there, if you have connections or family there. I can weigh in. I think a few years ago I was at a pain meeting, and it was discussed about retirement, and it was mainly when you retire and you're in private practice. And what came out was basically that the colleagues who didn't have real estate or any ownership in any real estate or ARC or building, office building, basically just had the name of their practice. And of course, I don't know, thousands of patients. They basically were told that may not be of value, especially if they want to sell out to private equity. So what I took home out of this seminar was basically that you need to have equity. Again, if you think about later on with your practice of selling it, or you think this selling your practice will be your retirement, So again, those are the few cents. It was a discussion I was proud of several years ago. We can move to the next question. It's actually quite interesting. We heard about all the troubles with the current payer situation, and Dr. Dunn is asking, is a cash pay / concierge pain practice a sustainable idea?
It depends on it. Well, I think it depends on your type of practice. If you're running an interventional pain practice, you're going to have to contract with a lot of the insurance companies. They're paying your facility fees. They're paying your procedures. And whereas if your practice is more office based, such as mine, it lends itself more easily to a cash pay practice. For example, if I stopped taking any insurance in 2024, I would have to set my fee schedule. I could do that fairly easily. I could say, okay, all of my consults are going to be this price, my return visits this price, my spine procedures this price, my non-spine procedures this price, sedation this price, and that's it. 6 items. Oh, you could throw in some ancillaries like urine drug screen this price. So maybe 6 items, and that's your menu. Very transparent, very easy, very reproducible. And I could probably make a go of it. And I could probably be competitive with everyone else. If you decide, do you want to do that? It's appealing for those of us who see falling reimbursement year after year. It's appealing to those of us who see restrictive policies saying, okay, no, you can't do these epidurals the way you've been doing them. You have to now, you're now subject to audit restrictions where they'll say, okay, your patients have failed 4 weeks of conservative therapy before you can treat a lumbar radicular pain pattern. Those of us who've been practicing for 25 or more years think that's crazy, but that's the new restrictions we're facing. So it would be appealing to be cash pay. You would have to set your fee schedule very competitively. You would have to have a good reputation in your area before. I don't think it'd be easy for you to jump in and start cash pay practice from day one. It may be very difficult.
You need a good reputation and
Yeah.
to make sure I don't see it necessary placing. And then we're based on the interventions, which is a cost on its own. I think we can go to the last question. This is recommendations on how to retain patients and establish a good referral base when you newly join a private practice. How do you get your name out?
I'll speak real briefly on that. I mean, retaining patients is just about providing good patient care. There's nothing really more to that, both, procedural wise, doing good procedures, but also having good communication skills with your patients, and also making sure your staff treats patients well, your advanced practice providers that you work with treat your patients well. Good referral base. I mean, no matter what, you have to get out there and meet people. Yes, you can do as much social media, online marketing as you want, which, I mean, I think there is a role of that for that, but I think still to this day, maybe depending on your market, I think going out there and meeting people is still the most important, because I mean, for us, it's still most of the referrals come from other physicians, and they're not looking at social media to determine who they're referring their patients to, I would hope. So one tip I can give people, which is most times when you go out marketing, you got to spend an hour, half an hour, 60 minutes doing a lunch, or even longer doing a dinner, or maybe even a breakfast before clinic. One very efficient way to meet a lot of physicians in your area is to join the local county medical society or regional medical society, which is usually primarily primary care physicians, and as well as other specialties, but typically they're mostly primary care physicians who are probably going to be your biggest referring doctors. So you attend one meeting a month, and there's 30-40 doctors there, and you meet them all. But I would recommend also getting involved, going on a frequent basis. Don't just show up once or twice a year. But I think that's a super efficient way to get your name out there.
Michael, thank you very much for the excellent answer. It is 8:32 p.m. and I would say on behalf of Asra Pain Medicine and the APPD, I would like to thank you for your participations in today's event. The next Asra Pain Medicine / APPD Hot Topics webinar will be on January 2nd. So January 2nd in the new year, and we will focus on neuromodulation. We will talk about neuraxial neuromodulation as well as peripheral neuromodulation. We hope to see you then. Thank you very much and have a pleasant evening.